Hello again to many folks who have been attending the 2021 summer session. And hello and welcome to folks who are just tuning in today to join us. I am Maya Alanevsky. I'm the Events and Outreach Manager here at the Center for Contemplative Mind and Society. We're thrilled to be here today with Dr. Monika to give the 2021 Arthur Zajonc Lecture. And here with us is our founding director, Mirabai Bush, to give you a welcome and a little background in this lecture series. So Mirabai, I hand it off to you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this special event. This is the 4th annual Arthur Zajonc Lecture in Contemplative Pedagogy, presented today by Monika, at which we're so happy. And she will be introduced by Board Chair Michelle Chapman after I speak and we see a short film about Arthur. Monika is preceded by 3 amazing contemplative scholars. And if you haven't listened to their talks, please do. You'll be happy you did. Paul Wapner, Vita Goler, and Lenwood Heyman. They were all amazing. So Arthur and I have been friends for 25 years. He's an insightful scholar, a deep practitioner, and an open-hearted lover of humanity. He was director of the Contemplative Mind program in higher education for his first 15 years, starting in 95, and then executive director of the center for a while after I retired. He was also director of the Mind and Life Institute and professor emeritus of physics at Amherst College. Arthur oversaw the Contemplative Practice Fellows Program and our partnership with the American Council of Learned Societies. And that program included more than 100 fellows who were the true pioneers in this field in schools across the country. When they agreed to develop courses that integrated practice into their teaching, hardly anybody was doing it. And they really helped the rest of us understand what that could be. Arthur became a leading voice in contemplative pedagogy. He designed a program bringing contemplative pedagogy into the teaching and learning centers. He designed this summer session that many of you are attending, not this very one, but the series. This is I think it's the 18th year. I might be off by year. He initiated the Association for Contemplative Mind in Higher Education and our series of national conferences. He was genius at imagining and developing forms that would help everyone feel supported and comfortable and safe and inspired in bringing these practices into the academy. So thanks to you all for being here. The movement you're part of is the real tribute to Arthur. And thanks to Monika for delivering the lecture, to the generous funders of this project. It's a 10-year project, especially the Fetzer Institute, Paula Sager, Carolyn Jacobs, both of whom are here today, Barry Hershey, and Diana Chapman Walsh. And most of all, to Arthur for the great gifts that you have given us all. And now we're going to see a short film, video made by Carrie and about Arthur. It's 6 minutes long, I think.
All right, what I'd like to do this evening is to really speak to, you could say, the theme of the future of higher education, but to do so in not in a prescriptive way, but more in a kind of larger way, which really addresses the question of, you could say, what is this enterprise that we're actually doing? What is it all about?
We welcome you to the Arthur Zajonc Lecture on Contemplative Education. This annual lecture honors Arthur's groundbreaking work in physics and the humanities, his commitment to teaching, and his vision of colleges and universities as places where meaning and purpose are tightly interwoven with intellect and action, where compassion and care are infused with insight and knowledge.
Knowledge is not an object that you acquire. It's not a mechanism that somehow you provide to the human mind. It's actually an epiphanal moment. If science is, as I'm saying, born out of these epiphanies, then I think the reflective and contemplative has a lot to offer, not only cultivation of attention, but even as a mode of inquiry, even as a way of knowing, which is, after all, the central project that universities and colleges are engaged in.
For the last 40 years, Arthur Zajonc has worked at the intersection of modern physics, humanities, and contemplative traditions. As Emeritus Professor of Physics at Amherst College and Scientific Coordinator and past President of the Mind and Life Institute, he has built a body of work that includes research on the foundations of quantum physics, the relationship between science and the humanities, and the practice of contemplative education and inquiry.
How is it we guide our lives and conduct our lives? Where do we find our next step? And especially for students who are forming their lives, the contemplative as a means of inner guidance, that you really begin to weigh and sort out your values gently and reflectively, can be of huge help. If we are committed to knowledge, then we ought to be committed also to exploring the world with these lenses, with this method in mind and heart. If we're going to have a perspective which is whole, then we need to bring all of our capacities to the issues that we confront, spiritual capacities as well as more conventional sensory-based intellects and the like.
At CMind, the Center for Contemplative Mind and Society, Arthur served as the founding director of the academic program and later as executive director. His accomplishments in these roles include initiating the annual summer sessions on contemplative teaching and learning, founding the Association for Contemplative Mind in Higher Education and its annual conferences, and leading retreats for educators.
And so what's the pedagogy? What's the pedagogy for the end of suffering? I mean, this is like, okay, we're going to do the end of suffering, But I think you have to actually reach out that direction. You have to reach somehow that far. It's all right. As long as it's not filled with pride and hubris, it has some modesty about it. Even if we just take a little step in that direction. I think that when we take up the practice of contemplative pedagogy, the work that we're doing here, we're not just doing a little add-on. It seems to me that when we introduce this modality, we're trying to address that deep-set ignorance. So this is a revolution in higher education, I hope, that takes us into the future. And to be in the presence of it when I'm here with you all is a special grace and privilege. Thank you very much. So life is dense, but we need to calm ourselves, get clear, get quiet, direct attention, sustain the attention, open up to what is normally invisible. And certain things begin to show themselves, maybe gently to begin with, but nonetheless, it deepens and enriches our lives. No matter how deeply we engage the world, no matter how far we manage to penetrate into the mystery, there will always be more mystery. It's always deeper, it's always bigger, but it's always an invitation. The mystery is a kind of invitation in. Find the door.
What a truly beautiful, moving, and incredible video. Thank you so much, Carrie, for putting that together. And Thank you for allowing us to deeply experience Arthur in that way. Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Good morning. I'm Michelle Chatman, honored to be with you this evening as the president of the board for the Center for Contemplative Mind in Society, and absolutely thrilled to introduce my friend, mi hermana, Dr. Monika L. Son. Monika L. Son joined the Percy Ellis Sutton Sikh program of John Jay College of Criminal Justice, City University of New York in 2003, and was awarded tenure in 2009. She has served as a faculty counselor and advisor over the years. In the fall of 2012, Dr. Son began a new role in Sikh as the counseling coordinator, overseeing the intake, evaluation, and assessment of counseling practices and interventions within the department. In her capacity as counseling coordinator, she works closely with her department chair, director, and serves as college liaison on the CUNY Office of Special Programs, Council of Counselors. She also works on various campus-wide committees, providing consultation on best practices for student success. Dr. Son completed her master's in education and counseling at the Fordham Graduate School of Education in 2012. She also received her license in mental health counseling in 2006. In 2013, she was awarded a PhD in developmental psychology from the CUNY Graduate Center. Her dissertation, entitled Pathways of Activity, Lessons from Dominican College Students, explored first and second generation Dominican students' strategies for effectively navigating a wide variety of contexts. Her longstanding research on immigrants, identity, and education allowed her to co-author chapters on immigration in schools, and she has also presented at a number of conferences. Dr. Son, who is also an experienced yogi and meditation practitioner, incorporates the use of mindfulness in her counseling and supervision practices. Dr. Son is an incredible human being. I am so really honored and overjoyed to know her. I have experienced her as one who is truly brilliant, one who possesses a courageous warmth, which is tricky in higher education, but it is a courageous warmth, a deep presence. When you are with her and she is with you, you know that she is with you. And something I really admire, an effortless authenticity, which is, I think, something that can really help us transform not only higher education, but this world, an effortless authenticity. Be ready, because whenever I leave her presence, I feel more stable, more solid, and smarter. So have your little notebooks or whatever you're going to record these incredible lessons on, and do enjoy this lecture. My friend, mi hermana, Dr. Monika L. Son.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much. Wow. That was beautiful. You know, these days I think less about the roles I play and more about the ways in which people remember our relationship, my relationship to them. And I first want to start off by thanking Arthur for opening the space, for having a place, a space, a community to really think about the deep questions, the important questions of why we're in this thing called higher education, teaching, serving students. And I want to thank C-Mind because I remember my first conference. I think, I don't even know, it may have been 2016, 2017. And I literally opened, I think it was Mindful Magazine. I saw an ad and my heart started beating. I was like, I have to go to this conference. I submitted a proposal. I got accepted. I show up in California and I know nobody there. And then all of a sudden, I have this tribe of people who I love, who love me. And I'm looking at them, Maya, Carrie, Leela, these badass white women who have always welcomed me. I am just honored to be amongst the likes of Dr. Michelle Chapman, Stephanie Briggs, Abigunde, Len Wood, Marlon, Jen, all of these incredible scholars who inspire me to do this work and to really just take a leap of faith, and try my best to stay aligned with what I believe this work should be. So with that, I also want to give some props to the summer session. I was a facilitator in 2018. I sat through the plenary sessions this week, which were incredible. And this week of summer session is just a way of really beginning your semester with inspiration, with healing, with community, and finding a way to reconnect back with the things that really remind us deeply about why we do this work. And so I just really wanted to thank the amazing facilitators this week, Dr. Yudia Selidwen, Dr. Lisa Marie Napoli, Dr. David Robinson Morrison, and Katie, I'm sorry, I have her name here, Keijing Tong. Just incredible. I've learned so much. And they really have helped me think more about what I wanted to share with you today. I also really want to thank Dr. Yudia Selidwen for reminding us about how interconnected we are with this earth and planet, and bringing in the presence of Indigenous practices and Indigenous conversations and Indigenous knowledge back to the spaces that we're in. So I will share my screen, and some of you may have seen this from me before. Let me go back a little. And I was telling Maya just a little while ago, you know, I used to be really good at multitasking, and that has somehow faded in this time for me. But I think I will just ask you to be a little patient with me. So some of you may have seen these pictures of my ancestors, my antepasados. And these are my grandparents, Luis and Pablo Luis Morobel and Clemencia Vargas. My biological grandmother, this is my mother. My biological grandmother passed in childbirth with my mother. And my grandmother in this picture, Clemencia, is the woman that I came to know as my grandmother. And I remember I have pictures of her helping my mother when my sister and I were born. I have pictures of her coming to the hospital to be with me when my firstborn was born. That was 14 years ago. And I always bring my ancestors into the room with me. And why do I do that? This is a picture of my aunt, who was like a second mother to me. My mom passed recently in January, and she had lived quite some time, almost a decade, with Alzheimer's dementia. My aunt also died of Alzheimer's dementia, and my sister and I were the primary caregivers for both of them. But my mother, my aunt, and my grandparents, and on the side of my father as well, were pioneering peoples. They founded, they're from a small town called Luperón in Puerto Plata and in the northern part of the Dominican Republic. And their two families founded that town, were a big part of creating the infrastructure, the economy, the governance, the education opportunities in that town. And then my family came to the United States in the late 60s during the Trujillo dictatorship. So whenever I think of myself and challenging times that I've ever had, I think about these people on the screen and how incredibly brave and strong they were. Just starting things, innovating things. And I remember the courage and the bravery that it took. And I remember that I have that in myself as well. And I think it's really important when we think about contemplative practice to situate and ground in who we are and who our peoples are and where we come from. And I'm sure that you all have stories about who your people are and where you come from and what you have of them and what you would like to continue to share with them about them in your life. And as I say that, I'm just turning over because my dad, who regularly Zoom bombs me, has walked into the room. I just want to make sure I acknowledge him. I'm sure he was downstairs with my sister. But as I say that, one of the most important practices that I've integrated into teaching, into my leadership, in 2018, I became chair of the Sikh department. And I remember when I was the counseling coordinator, I would begin many of my meetings with the counselors and the faculty with meditation. And at first, there was a lot of resistance. But when I became chair, this is what we do. And you can imagine that in this year of pandemic, beginning our departmental meetings with a practice, and not only meditation, but with some kind of contemplative practice, has really kept our community together. So with that, I want to lead us into a practice. And I know that some of you have been sitting in front of your screens for most of the day. So if you feel like you need to turn your camera off for this, I invite you to do so. You can do that now. But find a comfortable seat. And if you can, bring your feet to the ground. And just begin to turn your attention inward. And you can start simply by taking a deep breath in and exhaling. And I invite you to, if you know the name of the unceded lands on which you stand or sit. Mine is the Lenape here in New York City. Just to bring them into your mind, into your heart, to acknowledge, to honor that there were people before us. And as you continue to bring your attention inward, continuing to inhale and exhale, I'm going to share with you a few words. And then I'm going to play some music for you. And the words are, I am a radiant being of light and healing. I feel peace. I feel safe. I heal from a whole place. And continuing to inhale and exhale. I invite you to listen to the music. I am a radiant being of light and healing. I feel peace, I am safe, I am a whole place. I am a radiant being of light and healing. I feel peace, I am safe, I am from a whole place. I am a radiant being peace. I am safe by you from all place. I am a radiant being of light and healing. I feel peace. I am safe by you from all place. I am a radiant being of light and healing. I feel peace. I am safe by you from all place. I am a radiant being of light and healing. I feel peace. I am safe by you from all place. I am a radiant being of light and healing. I feel peace. I am safe by you from all place. I am a radiant being of light and healing. I feel peace. I am safe by you from all place. I am a radiant being of light and healing. I feel peace. I am safe by you from all place. Continue to inhale and exhale. Just allowing those words to stay with you, to be with you. And as we gently come back into the space, maybe you can open your eyes if they were closed. Just look around your surroundings to remember where you are. I invite you to join me back on the screen. And I'm going to share the song is from Beautiful Chorus, which some of you may be familiar with. And again, the words are, I am a radiant being of light and healing. I feel peace. I am safe. I heal from a whole place. And the facilitators this week talked a lot about healing. And as we know, this year has been a time that has called us to ask ourselves, right? What does it mean to heal from a whole place at this moment? What does it mean to heal from a whole place? So I invite you to hold that question for yourself. And if you have an answer, I invite you to put it in the chat. And I will also say that, I'm not much of a lecturer. I like to ask questions and engage with the group. There are many of you here, so we will be having time for questions and answers, but we can engage in the chat. So if you have a response, what does it mean to heal from a whole place? Yeah. To realize that all the answers are already within, not turning away from the suffering, holding it tenderly, lovingly, to be fully alive, acceptance, aware who we are. Wow, to see oneself as fully human. Heal from a sense of being enough, just being is enough. Deep acceptance and holding grief as wisdom. These are beautiful. I am more than the sum of the parts that feel, that have been broken. Yeah. Thank you, Franny. Beautiful. My heart is still beating. Our hearts are beating. Yeah. And my heart is beating with you all as well. I think about this question at this time, and I wanted to share some of the insights about what I heard, in addition to your beautiful comments, what I heard this week about healing. And to heal from a whole place includes our personal stories, right? It also integrates an understanding that our stories are completely interconnected, interwoven with each other's stories, and that they do not always reflect all that we are, that sometimes those stories are other people's and other cultures' projections of us. I also heard that healing from a whole place means that we must include the ways in which we find our rhythm and how we find our collective rhythms to make the changes we want to see in this world. It means we are including the both and. My colleague from John Jay, Cheryl Franks, who's on this call, introduced me to the term both and. She's a social worker by training, I think a decade ago. And I knew that, first of all, I love Cheryl. Second of all, I knew that C-Mind was the place for me because I have never heard so many people use the term both and, right? To understand that we are always including the both and in all that we do. And that, as our brilliant plenary speaker said earlier this week, Dr. Robinson, freedom, healing from a whole place means that freedom is our birthright and ease is our resting pose. that liberation is living in right relationship with all things. And for me, especially at this time, and maybe not something that I had thought about so much before, healing from a whole place means that I'm also thinking about the ways I have harmed myself, others, and this planet. And lastly, healing from a whole place requires that I ask myself, what suffering has alerted me to at this time? So I'll say that again, and I will put the question up for you as well. And I want you to sit with this question for a little bit. What suffering has your practice alerted you to in this time? And this might be easier if you have an established practice. So if you don't, perhaps you can think about, what about this talk called you here tonight? So if you can answer this question for yourself, and before you do this, I invite you again just to take a moment, take a few breaths, and let this question be with you. Maybe notice any sensations that are coming up for you, that you might be feeling in your body. What suffering has your practice alerted to you in this time? And because I know that there are a lot of academics in the room, and we tend to be a lot in here, one of the practices I invite you to use, and it's one that my somatic teacher taught me. Gently bring your hand to your heart and tap if you find that you're too much in your head. Just drop in to your body and invite your heart to show you the answer. And when you're ready, you can share in the chat. Thank you, Jupong. The suffering of so many beings going extinct every day. And I invite us to continue to take deep breaths. Sitting with my edges, a desire for transformation and holding others' desires to return to normal. Loneliness and isolation. Yeah. The suffering of the fear that keeps us from voicing our truths. Wow. Fears and self-doubt. Racial and ancestral alienation. Injured dignity. Mary Lou, that my whiteness as social construct is implicated into the suffering of others, is an othering to my whiteness. The grief of witnessing destruction of sacred life, peoples, beings, and Mother Earth. Yeah. Yeah. Violence for people of color, or as we say here in this space, people of the global majority, that has been with me all year. My practice of meditation while walking brings joy and awareness. I am one with Mother Earth. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing this with me, with all of us. I just want to honor a name that it's challenging to sit with suffering, to name suffering, to see it, to be with it, to hear others talk about it. And what I invite you to do at this moment is just for a minute, because it's important that we continue to take care of ourselves in this conversation. Bring your palms together and rub them until you create some heat in your hands. And bring them to any part of your body that needs some love at this moment. Maybe it's your eyes, your heart, your shoulders, your belly, wherever you need some extra loving. And I'm going to read back the words from the healing hymn once again. I am a radiant being of light and healing. I feel peace. I am safe. I heal from a whole place. Thank you for sharing with me and with the group. And I'm going to share a little bit about what I've noticed this year about my own suffering. So earlier this week, I was reflecting on a particular conversation that I had recently where I successfully articulated, I thought I successfully articulated a change that needed to happen at my institution. The person who I was in dialogue with was not hurtful, but did not respond from a place of connection. And for me, that is important. It felt robotic, removed, or one of my favorite institutional words, strategic. And I see many of you smiling. I felt unseen, unheard, and dismissed. It's these moments that are really tricky for me because they bring me back into some really painful moments in the academy. As I wrote about the experience, I felt the tension in my body begin to rise, first in my belly, then in my throat, then in my jaw. Just as it does, I have learned to realize when I am witnessing that nuanced harm that often happens in our academic settings. When we are more focused on the impact of what we say or do rather than the intention. It happens in our institutions more often than we would like to admit. And not only have I experienced it, I've done it. You've done it. I felt like I was being suffocated, like someone's knee was on my throat. And I recognized that equating my privileged experience as a highly educated PhD and as a chair, a position that holds institutional power, to evoke the visual imagery of George Floyd's death might seem distorted to some. No, my physical life was not in current danger, but the metaphor is very intentional. Ashley Zamora and Kari Hari in 2017 wrote the following about women of color's experience in academia. To be a woman and a person of color is to hold intersecting identities that are the antithesis of the ivory tower. As such, we and other women of color have been forced to occupy the margins of the academy. The double bind of racism and sexism has resulted in the methodical marginalization of our voices, the silencing of our perspectives, and the stifling of our brilliance. This not only pains us, but also suffocates and shackles the construction of new knowledge and who we are. I refuse for my brilliance and light to be dimmed. I resist it with all my heart, my body, my mind. I know that I am supported by the earth, the ground I walk on, the air I breathe, and the ancestors that walk with me. I also know that whenever I feel threatened, I tend to freeze. And we were talking about this earlier in today's plenary about the different responses to threat. So I tend to freeze. It's an embodied response that has kept me safe in the past, particularly around violence. I know that to move out of this response, as I've learned in my somatic training, I have to move my body. So I stand up from this chair, and I won't stand completely because you won't be able to see me. I move away from my computer to remind myself that I am in this body, this one right here, right now. I shift my hips side to side, just like we did this morning, as if I'm about to start dancing. I close my eyes, dig my feet into the ground. I bring one hand to my belly and one hand to my heart to remind myself that I have the agency to choose to be in this breath, in this body, in this moment, and that my heart is open to receive what my body is trying to remind me. And what is my body reminding me? That I am safe, that I am loved. I repeat those words. I am safe and I am loved. And I am valued just for being here, not for what I can produce, but just being here, breathing, being alive. I open my eyes, I situate my senses into my workspace area at home. I'm surrounded by my beautiful lavender walls. I look out to the tree in my backyard. I see the squirrels running up the tree. I hear the neighbor washing his car. I hear my son faintly ask me a question. I remind myself that I can come back to this present moment repeatedly. I can come back to this moment just by taking a breath. And as I regulate myself back into my body, I am also alerted to an awful truth. I too have invisibilized others. I too have drank the Kool-Aid and relied on external validations of my worth. I too have contributed to the exploitation of my voice, my intellect, and my energy, and the voices, intellect, and energy of others. I have given my power away, and I have taken it from others. I am the institution, and the institution is me. Oh, I find it interesting that I'm here again. This is what I teach, what I facilitate, what I write about, what I obsess about. I'm reminded about what Dr. Yudia Seligman shared in her plenary talk on Monday, that suffering is created by the distorted perception of the human mind. And I'm also reminded of this piece that is written by Breja Wade in Grieving While Black, an anti-racist take on oppression and sorrow. And she writes, oppression uses fear and anger to pervert conflict into violence, motivating us to hijack the flow of power through other beings and to try to hold it captive. If we seek to change our surroundings, we must begin by changing ourselves. Only then can we support others in actualizing their own agency and in recognizing themselves as conduits of power. We cannot do this if we are subconsciously hijacking our own flow of power, fearing what may arise for us or fearing what others may call up. We can each easily inflict systemic violence without intention. By allowing our own fear to block power in another and redirecting it in ways that are comfortable for us. This perversion of power is all the more harmful in relationships with marginalized people who may have been conditioned to perceive and respond to someone as the ultimate holder and purveyor of power in an interaction. It is difficult enough for people who believe they have power to willingly redefine their relationship to it and release some of its trappings. It is even more difficult for people who feel they have very little power to relinquish what little they have. In many ways, integration, growth, and actualization are privileges for people who aren't socialized into fear for the sake of survival. Not everyone has the emotional and physical space to challenge preconceived notions that have kept them alive. Because we live in a society where power is reduced to an object to be owned and wielded, it is important to understand that our social location means that we cannot enter into social situations with equal power. Therefore, we do not all take equal risks when interacting with either the world or each other. So I'm going to take just a breath here for myself and a sip of water. And I'm going to invite any comments or questions in the chat. What's coming up for you now? Yeah. Thank you, Bo Karen. Yeah. I see many of you nodding. Yeah. And I love this question that you raised, Bo Karen, today in the plenary. Kai Chen was talking about how contemplative practices are, I'm trying to find how it was that she said it because it was beautiful. But contemplative practice is any practice that invites us to ask more questions, right? And I have some questions. I have some questions that have come out of this thinking for me in my practice. I will share them with you. Yeah. What is the practice to recognize all beings have power, and how do we give it to them instead of taking it away? I am the institution. I felt like that, like a gut punch. And it was also freeing. The main focus is to transform myself. Yeah, that's a great question, Mirabai. I'm going to come back to that one. How do you talk about power to your students at John Jay who expect to have careers in law enforcement? Yeah, that's a hard one. Sometimes with students, it can feel like the liberatory response to a request will overwhelm my current resources. But the alternative is to, as you said, be strategic, which also feels bad. How do we find the balance? Yeah. Yeah. I want to answer some of these questions and maybe hear from a few of you. So I will share one more thing with you briefly, just some other questions about what many of you are turning to in the chat. How does fear of losing my power impact my relationships with others, my students, my colleagues, my institutions, the planet? And again, this question of where am I doing harm? And perhaps this question about how to find the balance. What are the practices that hold me accountable to my intention of not doing harm? Right? And what do I need to support that intention? So we will continue to, we'll engage in a little bit of a discussion in just a moment. I wanted to, actually, let's do it now. Is it possible, Maya, for folks to unmute? I'm going to answer Mirabai's question, but perhaps some folks may want to unmute. So, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'll change that setting now. And
Okay.
just a gentle reminder for folks to mute themselves when they're done speaking. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, this question about students at John Jay who want to enter law enforcement. As I said, this is a challenging question, and one that currently the institution is trying to answer and really be thoughtful and careful about how we engage students in that conversation, particularly because we are predominantly a Hispanic serving institution, minority serving institution, as they say. But I think the question comes back to, or the further questions come back to who we are in our communities and what we represent in those communities, where we have privilege and power, because we all hold privilege and power, and how we teach our students to engage in those critical questions. We often, the academy is a space where people come for answers. But one of the things that we are coming to realize, one of the sufferings that maybe we didn't realize, is that this world is pretty uncertain, and we just don't know what could happen. And one of the things that we're noticing about our students is that they don't know what to do with that. They don't know how to be with that, how to think about that. So I think it's about supporting them to ask these questions. Other comments or questions from folks who want to unmute?
Hi, Monica.
Hi, Bo Karen.
Hi. Thank you so much. I'd love to hear you elaborate on what it means to give away power when that's asked of communities with traditionally less power. Could you elaborate on what kind of power you mean there?
Sure. I think there is definitely a historical recognition of communities that have been removed of their power. One of the conversations that this country is having a dialogue around now is around critical race theory, and whether those theories actually reflect true history for this entire nation. So I think the question is about how do we understand for those of us who work with certain communities or work in roles of service, how do we understand our own role, right? Our own role in our power and privilege. Where do we engage in taking people's power, right? How do we understand how our presence impacts the communities we serve? And the first place to do that, however, is always coming back to ourselves and understanding our own history, our own understanding of where we wield our power, where we use our power, what kind of agency we have, and how we understand our own histories and how they interconnect with others and the communities that we serve.
Monica, there's a great question in the chat um, that someone shared. They're sitting in the space of, I am the institution and I want to change the institution. And the question is, how do I remain authentic and not lose myself in also being the institution?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that question. And it's a challenging question. And it's one that I think many of us find ourselves in, many of us on this call. I think it begins, in recognizing where we contribute and replicate oppressive structures in ourselves and our institutions. Part of this work requires us to understand our own internalized oppression and how that manifests, how that lives in our bodies, right? Understanding how that shows up in our interactions, and how we engage others, and healing from that. And it's impossible not to be impacted by what we're seeing and what we're hearing. It's impossible not to replicate these things at all levels. We may succeed in some ways, but I think having a space of compassion for ourselves and offering that as we continue to do this work, to ask these questions, right? We are offering that compassion to ourselves, and then we can offer it to others when we see the harm that occurs. Yeah, I think higher education is in that limbo space. I think it's busting at the seams for something different. We wouldn't be here together if we weren't hoping, wishing for something that looks different. And I know that these are tough questions, and I think we have to ask them. Other thoughts or comments? Yes. The difference between a revolution from a place of love versus from a place of anger, rage. Yeah. Yes. It's important to sit with these questions. And it's important to sit with them in community, right? We can't answer them alone, but we know we have them. Now we can see that so many of us have them, right? So many of us are thinking about. The institution is an instrument, and we can learn to play music on it. So I wanted to share one final thing with you all, just to end and wrap up. The name of the talk is Es aquí donde sanamos, which is, it is here where we heal. And as I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the talk, my mom passed in January. And I have an ancestral altar at home for her. Every day I light a candle, just like she had, with pictures of all the ancestors in the family. I put a little cup of coffee for her, and I speak to her. And sometimes she answers. And recently, as I was thinking about this talk, I heard her voice, and it inspired me to write this poem. And I'll share it with you. And I'll read the Spanish and the English version. It's called Navigator of Messy Edges. Navegante de orilla desbordadas, ¿me permite un vaso de agua? Tengo sed. Unos lentes de sol. Me duelen los ojos. ¿O será que no quiero que me oigan los llantos que me ahogan, la desesperación que me sofoca? Estoy sufriendo sin mi mami. Me dejó sola en un mundo desordenado, sin corazón, exigente y loco. No hay de qué. Tengo que seguir. Yo todavía sigo aquí, flotando, entrando raíces en la tierra. Mami me acompaña. La oigo. No que María estaba lavando y el jabón se fue por el río. Despierta. Haz algo. No malgastes tu vida. Es aquí donde sanamos. And the English translation. Navigator of messy edges. Allow me a glass of water. I'm thirsty. Sunglasses. My eyes hurt. Or is it that I don't want people to hear? The cries that drown me, the despair that suffocates me. I'm suffering without my mommy. She left me alone in a messy world, without heart, demanding and crazy. It doesn't matter. I must continue. I am still here, floating, grounding roots in the earth. Mommy is here with me. I hear her. Not that Maria was washing and the soap went down the river. Stop making excuses. Wake up. Do something. Do not squander your life. This is where we heal. Thank you so much, everyone.